Why is it that it's always evil barbarians rescuing me? That never happens in stories. Maybe you're reading the wrong stories. Wisdom was hard to come by, anger was far easier to grasp, and less ephemeral. The blanket on a chill night, rather than the faded lettering on an old scroll read by guttering candlelight. Hello and welcome to William's Lifetime. I'm your host, Liam, aka Hanuvar, and today I'll be doing a spoiler-free review of Howard Andrew Jones's Shadow of the Smoking Mountain. Shadow of the Smoking Mountain is a 2024 novel by Howard Andrew Jones. It is book 3 in the Chronicles of Hanuvar, which started with Lord of a Shattered Land, which I reviewed about a year ago, and then was followed up by A City of Marble and Blood in that same year, actually. And this is a sword and sorcery saga about Hanuvar rescuing his people. Of course, I assume you won't listen to this unless you've read the first 2 books, but you should go and read those. Lord of Shattered Land was one of my favorite books from last year. And this will probably be one of my favorite books from this year. It seems to be heading that direction. The preamble recaps some of the story, particularly like book 2, via an intradiegetic narration, and sets up for what is to follow. As before, these chapters are pretty much self-contained stories, sometimes feeling somewhat standalone. In focus, they all move along a greater and more epic plot, and near the end, they kind of connect a little more as we kind of get to the finale that's building at the end of the book. And this one starts with Hanuvar still looking a little crisper than his years because of some magic in book 2. He's looking for Volani slaves to free in the south part of the Dervan Peninsula, not quite the southern portion, but further south than Derva, where he spent a good chunk of book 2. This area is called Oscanus. It's based off the Italian peninsula's Ostian language, particularly at ruins by a volcano. You can probably see the connection to the title already here. This is in part to the seat of Volani children, saved by Cyprian and Amelia. It's a little slower start, but sets up something more like a creepy underground thing and some of the main characters in a setting that is kind of around or nearby for much of the book as well. So this one's kind of less of a travelogue in some sense, but it still is at the same time. There's also a new character of import that is introduced here, the enigmatic archaeologist Kalenius, which is a nice nod to Carl Edward Wagner's Cain. There's some unique magics and monsters that keep it interesting, and as always, Hanuvar is a very lovable and competent hero. Also, some wrenches are thrown into Hanuvar's plans, some well-meaning and some being rather more nefarious. There's lots of moving pieces. The spotlight is not always on, certain characters. In fact, there's one story that follows Antira's entirely. But, some of these characters appear once or over multiple stories or, only once in a while, like Isavara, Catharlo, Cyprian. They're somewhat regular. Same with Antares, of course. The stories themselves are consistently entertaining, but hop around in moods, more like short stories than a novel usually does, which isn't surprising, obviously, here. For example, Family Heirloom made me tear up, but the following story had me laughing out loud. I think there's some things to think about, too, in this one. Particularly, there is a kind of discussion on artistry that really stuck out. It made me think of AI. So yeah, take that as you will. And this also feels, just kind of an art in general too, not just in relation to AI, but just like feels pertinence to humanities kind of in general. Also, this feels like a wrap on the arc that started in book 1. The tale's not over, but it seems to have reached the end of its first leg, and it does so in a very satisfying manner. But it seems like we're probably going to be leaving Tyval after this, so we'll see. And I want to note how much I just kind of appreciated this read. I was feeling a bit down, oddly, about, work and finances mostly. And Sword and Sorcery often has this indomitable attitude. It's conquering and overcoming in a very personal manner. And it's often brusque and tough, sometimes villainous and picaresque. But Hanuvar is a selfless and virtuous in line with the several definitions of that word. And it was refreshing to read about such a character that he superbly is executing a twist on the genre while still feeling like Sword and Sorcery. This is something I needed. It's just so well done and executed, and I want to write like this as well, like that. When I was reading this book, I was like, often I can't get through anthologies or short story collections very quickly, and now this doesn't feel like a story collection or an anthology, but kind of feels like an in-between like a more epic fantasy novel and a short story collection, and I just got through it in 3 days. 3 days I worked 12-hour shifts, so I don't normally read a lot on those days. And I was super impressed, and I want to write like this. So bravo, Mr. Jones. Oh, one note, though. There's a character named Corvus who's a little on the nose, I think, but that's okay.